Hey there, everyone. I am Nick Goblirsch, and thank you very much for downloading, listening, watching, or subscribing to the Buckets of Change podcast. This is episode 3. It's been such a large amount of time since I've actually put out episode 2, which is unlike me. I've been podcasting for a while, and I've taken a long time to figure some things out before putting this episode out. And that's what I really wanted to talk about. I want to ensure that when you see me or listen to me, I sound and look the best I can be, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on whatever podcast player you're subscribing to the show. And even today's Wednesday, and it's the day before Thanksgiving, and it rained last night. So I would love to get out there and start painting, but everything's wet. And I put so much pressure on myself to do the best job I can all the time and no matter what I do, which is why I procrastinated in getting this episode out. I wanted to make sure everything looked right, sounded right. I got all this new equipment. It's so crazy. Like every year I've been podcasting for so long, every year the technology keeps getting better and better and simpler, which is awesome. But I wanted to talk about in this episode specifically, and I've been thinking about this long and hard the last few weeks, is about finding self-fulfillment in doing the best you can be. And if you're okay with it, I'd love to tell you. I'm going to tell you a quick story. Uh, I've been that whole idea of waiting to do something because in your head you feel that if I do it, it's not going to be the best. I was trying to figure out where that comes from, and I do a lot of self reflection. Self awareness is a big part of my life of really understanding why I feel the way I do, because in essence, I can help myself better. I can be more in the present. I can limit the anxiety I feel. And over the last several years, not only have in 2018, did I leave a successful corporate HR job and become an entrepreneur. That was a pretty big shift for me. I changed not only careers, but I've been working on changing myself. And that's what this whole podcast is about change and the things we overcome in order to become what we want to become and find fulfillment and joy, especially in what we do for a living. So I was reflecting on my childhood, which trying to figure out like why is it so important for me to be the best? And I think it all starts back when I was a kid. I was everything that happened in my life as a child was pretty tumultuous. Right now, my family life is pretty what's the word? Not sustainable, but pretty consistent. Everything kind of goes the way it goes. I have two unbelievable kids, a beautiful wife, Megan, and things are pretty much status quo. That's what I meant, status quo. I mean, we get through challenges in life like everyone does. But when you hear these life stories of people that have gone through crazy things, my life was pretty tumultuous when I was younger. My mother, once my twin sister and I turned 6, my mother became ill and then unfortunately died in January of 1984 or 82. We end up moving in with my grandmother at the time. My grandfather passes in April, 4 months later, and now she's a 65-year-old woman, and my sister and I are living with her as 6-year-olds, which is unbelievable. Any elderly folks out there, or people late in life, I don't want to say elderly folks, but people that are late in life right now that are actually taking care of young kids, that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal. And I'm so grateful for what she did and what she taught me those 3 years after we lived with her after my mom passed. And then we moved in with my father in 1980, 85. The time I spent being raised by a single parent was, I'm able to look back now and realize that I'm sure he did the best job he could, but it was a really shitty job, an absolutely shitty job. And later in life, I learned that my father treated me in a way to make himself feel better. My father, obviously losing a wife, and my father drank and spent a lot of time away from home. He was at the bar. I don't know if a lot of latchkey kids out there, Gen Xers, had parents who actually went and or single parents and had a father that drank. Or it doesn't have to be that specific Gen Xers, but latchkey kids. We come home from school and our parents didn't come home. Either we waited for them to come home from work, but my dad would come home from work and then he would go straight to the bar. and we didn't see a lot of him. But when I did see him, there was never a lot of encouragement at all. There wasn't a lot of, at least the encouragement that we got from my grandmother. We always felt warm and safe and loved and got a lot of attention. But once I became, uh, I turned 10 and 9 and I lived with my father, it wasn't really an exciting time as a kid. At a time when you really need to be nurtured and you're trying to figure yourself out, I felt kind of lost. So I did what I could to, and this is so important to me now, is do what I enjoy doing. So I would get involved in any activities I could. I would try new hobbies, try new interests. And in the midst of all that, I'd have a father who would constantly belittle me. And if he saw me doing something he didn't understand, he'd use words like loser, he'd dweeb, he would call me. And I didn't realize the damage that did until later in life. But when he would do that, you figure that you want your parents' love and you would work very, very hard to get it. So anytime I did something, I tried to be the best at it in order that some morsel of acknowledgement I would get from my dad. And in essence, that acknowledgement would equal love and that would make me feel good and safe and secure and just like I feel right now. So my entire adolescence into adulthood was constantly striving to be the best at everything that I did because I thought if I was the best, I would be acknowledged by the person that should be most important to me and vice versa, and I would feel loved. And it never happened. But yet I continued to work extremely hard no matter what I did. I even worked a small job in high school and I did that as well. And suddenly other people in my life became kind of like these paternal figures that could provide me with acknowledgement and quote unquote love that would make me feel good. So it was this constant cycle of trying to be the best I could be, whether I was working as a cashier at a pharmacy, trying to get the acknowledgement from my boss or doing nice things in school, being really polite and nice and overly generous to people, and that way people would acknowledge me. It wasn't really about being kind and generous. It was really about getting something back from them because that made me feel worthy and provided me some self fulfillment. And I didn't realize it. I've been reflecting on as I paint. I spend a lot of time outside. I'm working outside, and I hear that voice in my head that says, "Are you the best at what you do? Can you be the best at what you do?" And I'm wondering where's that coming from? And I think it really not only was it born as an adolescent and in young adulthood, but I think it really happened when once I joined the corporate world. I don't think I was meant to be in a corporate environment, but after moving in with my in-laws in 2000, not having anything to call my own, I really again now I'm suddenly living with other parents and I'm looking for acknowledgement and love and to again feel that security and that safety. And I start applying for jobs that I assumed that they would feel were worthy. And as I did that, I found positions that my goal was to be the best at that position. And the damaging part about pushing yourself to be the best at something is you're constantly comparing yourself to others, constantly comparing yourself to others because you have to aspire to be something, right? There has to be a rung on the ladder higher than that for you to jump onto, for you to feel that, okay, now I'm the best. Now, I'm not at the best at anything. And my best I try my best to do the best I can. And I didn't really understand that back then because even if I was doing the best I could, it was never good enough. I heard either my father's voice in my head belittling me or not having people around me that were acknowledging that. And I noticed, I was thinking like there have been times in my career where I would get really frustrated and annoyed at the people at work because they didn't think I was the best at what I did. They didn't give me the acknowledgement I thought I was supposed to get. And not only did I do a lot of self judgment, but I also judged others as well. Because if I compared myself to them and felt they weren't as good as I was at something or the job or position I was in, I would immediately belittle them. And I wouldn't really foster a lot of compassion. It was a lot more judgment and judgment versus compassion. I'll take compassion any day because judgment is such a horrible thing. It projects the worst out of you and really pushes people away. It doesn't allow them to uh, come into your world and provide any type of connection. It's something that if you're someone who does a lot of judgment, who spends a lot of time talking about others. That's just your mind trying to make you feel better about yourself. So I'm going through this judgment cycle, this self judgment cycle, and leading up into the latter part of my career, I, I stumbled across this book. A friend of mine recommended it. 2018, fall 2018 was very difficult because I'd gone through this life changing experience on this cruise to Alaska that convinced me that I no longer wanted to be that person or identify with that person who excelled at what they did. And that's pretty crazy too, because you figure you're at a time in your career where you're the best you can be, and you decide you don't want to do it anymore. And that is something that if you're in a career right now and you feel that there's got to be a better way of providing for your family that will provide more joy and fulfillment and help you become more present, I can understand, just like I was, how hesitant you could be to do that. And my friend refers this book to me. I start listening to it on Audible, and it's 2 hour book. It's called The Four Agreements. I actually have a small copy right here, and I must have given like 4 or 5 copies away. But this one I keep just to remind me how important this book was. There is a theory in this book, and there are a lot of self help books out there. I listen to them all the time while I work on a job site. But this one really stuck out, and I listen to this about 2 or 3 times a year, that we make agreements with ourselves. We say to ourselves, this is how it's going to be. And our life actions and how we respond to the world are dictated by those agreements. So back when I was a kid, I made the agreement with myself based on my environment and my desire to get my father's love and encouragement that I would have to be the best I could be at everything that I do, not knowing that it doesn't matter if I'm the best at anything that I do. And that then, like I said, snowballs into a lot of self judgment and feeling of failure and loneliness, and which led to a lot of depression back in 2018. But one of the agreements, there's four agreements in this book, and this book pushes that even though you might have agreements with you, if you follow these four agreements, you'll live a much happier life in this craziness. I was on a podcast recently called the Resilience Podcast, and it hasn't been published yet, but this gentleman who interviewed me named Brad Hook spoke in our back and forth. He talked about, and I've heard this before, but hearing him saying it refreshed my memory, that life is about finding, or happiness is those moments in life that fall between all the suffering. And living a productive life and a good life is hard. It's hard work. Even finding and becoming an entrepreneur and seeking a passion of mine in painting, being happy with what I do every day is a lot of work. People think that you leave an unhappy corporate life and become an entrepreneur. Even though you're your own boss, you still deal with all the situations and actually more things, because you're responsible for more things. And finding that happiness is hard work, and it's worth it. Don't get me wrong, it's worth it. But it is hard, it's hard work. And a lot of that has to do with the agreements that you make with yourself. And in this book, there's four agreements. I'm not going to talk through all of them. I'm going to probably save them for another podcast, but there's one specifically I want to focus on. The four agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, don't take anything personally. And the most important one in here that I started thinking about this week is always do your best. And I didn't quite understand what that meant. I knew, I think when I listened to this in 2018, I knew what it meant, but not until like the last like 2 or 3 weeks in the whole process of actually putting this podcast together and getting my mic situated, all these things that I was really, really good at a few years back. I had a TV studio in the house and all these things that I was doing that I had to almost relearn all this stuff, that I realized that we find an enormous amount of fulfillment, or a satisfaction with and self fulfillment in just doing the best we can. And it's hard. It's hard. We really want to be recognized in the world around us, and in doing that, and the way society works the only way to do that is to be the best. If you're an athlete, having the best record or winning the championship, if you're in the corporate America or in the workforce, having a high paying job and a really fancy title and having a lot of responsibility and a lot of power, Or someone like me as a painter having, 6 months book jobs booked out and making the most amount of money and having everyone talk about me. And when I think about doing my best and when were the moments that I did my best, it wasn't about what the world was giving to me. It was what I could find within myself. And I didn't need encouragement from someone. I didn't need validation from someone. I didn't need to legitimize myself in anything. It was all about what I felt inside. And I noticed I'm starting to make a switch in my work in my painting that I don't need to be the best painter. I just need to make sure that when I'm on a job site and a customer is trusting me to do work for them, I need to ensure that I'm doing the best job I can with whatever limitations I have, equipment I have, materials I have, no matter what it is, the actual how I prep the surface, which I'm doing a lot of this week. It's crunch time on this house that I'm about to finish. It's really about doing my best. And although the four agreements really talk about no matter how tired you are, always remember that make the agreement that doing your best is your best bet. And there is no question that when you do your best, as time passes, you will become better at that. And you will feel even more self fulfillment and self satisfaction because of the fact that you put your time in and you can see the quality of the work that you do. And even when I do these podcasts and I share my message with you, even though this is episode 3 and I want to get a little meta doing a podcast about a podcast, that these shows are only going to get better. I'm going to have different messages to share with you, better things to share with you over time because I'm going to learn again, continue to learn a lot more about myself and about change. And I know that if I was to go back in time and talk to myself when in that 2017-18 window when I started thinking there's got to be something different that serves my purpose in earning a living, that knowing if I start something new, because you can start something new all the time. I'm a big fan of understanding how to deal with change because as your life changes, as you change, you want to do things differently or do things different or do different things. And you should be able to have the tools and the comfort to know that as long as I do my best and I take one step in that direction, that eventually I will feel exactly what I felt previously and not be riddled with fear and guilt and self-judgment, which can be so damaging. And you're losing life when you do that. Like you lose time when you do that. You give things away, you give yourself away that time that you just can't get back. So if you are someone that is putting an enormous amount of pressure on yourself, no matter what trauma you've dealt with as a kid, whatever shaped that, whatever self awareness you have that you figured or triggers that you figure that's making you feel that you have to be the best at what you do because you want the outside world to recognize you, try to change your mindset and find better habits where you're doing the best you can do in no matter what situation you're in and know that that feels much better to know that you've done that with whatever resources that you have. And I'm going to continue to do that even though I'm new in this podcast. I'm going to continue to do that with you and the future speaking engagements that I have and the clients that I coach on career transition that are really stuck and can't make that jump because they're afraid they'll never be as good as they are. And I guarantee you, if you continue to do your best, you will be and you will become better and you will continue to do that over and over and over again with every life transition you experience. So guys, thank you for listening to episode 3 of the Buckets of Change podcast. I am trying to figure out what I'm going to do today. I have to do my best today on figuring out how I'm going to get work done before Thanksgiving. For all of you celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday, you may be listening to this after the holiday because I think, again, I'm still trying to relearn what I used to know about getting into a cadence about publishing this podcast. I plan on getting these shows out every Thursday and then the videos on YouTube if you like to watch me from my studio. And as I get guests in here, and I'm still trying to figure that out as well, you can watch those videos on Friday. Fingers crossed, I'll stay to that cadence, but it might take me some time because I'm doing the best I can, but I know I will absolutely get better. Please follow me on the socials and you can find all the links in the show notes. And one thing I want to include in the show notes too is if you're someone that's in a career that you're trying or a job position and you're trying to figure out what are the signs that are really, because I remember the signs I felt back in 2017, the questions I should have been asking myself. There's a link to a free assessment in my show notes where it takes less than a minute. And it may open your eyes up to thinking that maybe now might be the right time to think of about a transition. And maybe it's time to take at least one step in that direction to find the fulfillment and joy that you deserve and becoming more present with those most important to you. I know I'm going to have some fun this week as I take some time off, but again, I love what I do, and that's even better. When you love what you do, you find yourself doing the best job you can. And I love talking to people about trying to find things that they want to do for a living that they love to do. It's hard. Again, it's hard. Just like I said, it's hard to be happy with what you do because there's a lot of work in seeking that out. But if you make the right steps, it's pretty much right at your fingertips. Guys, thank you for listening. I'm Nick Goblirsch. This is the Buckets of Change podcast, and I will talk to you very, very soon.